Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune into these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So, before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. The dusk blankets the marsh in gloom as Levi trudges through the muddy reeds, his flashlight wavering in his grip. Its beam cuts through the shadows, searching for his friend Mara, who vanished after a frantic call about random whispers in the swamp. Her voice cracked with fear, the line dropping mid-sentence, leaving only silence behind. The air hangs thick with rot and a faint, sour sting, urging him deeper into the mire. He clutches Mara's bracelet, found snagged on a root, its beads warm against his palm, drawing him onward. A rustle stirs the water, soft and erratic, trembling the ground beneath Levi's boots. He halts, sweeping the light across the marsh, its glow catching on twisted cypress and a rise where the reeds part unnaturally. The rustle pulses, disjointed and deep, pulling him toward the mound where shadows cling thick and wet. He calls Mara's name, his voice dampened by the stillness, answered only by a faint, wet scrape from the rise's base. His heart pounds, but he presses forward, the bracelet glinting in his grasp. The mound looms damp, its surface slick with moss, streaked with a dark, oily sheen that glimmers in the flashlight's beam. Levi's light shakes as he climbs, spotting Mara's scarf, tangled in the roots, its fabric soaked with that same sheen. The rustle deepens, thrumming through his legs, and he peers over the edge, the beam revealing a hole that plunges downward, its walls slick with slime. A clatter rises from below, random and deliberate, and his stomach twists, dread rooting him in place. A shape flits beyond the mound, swift and hunched, vanishing as Levi swings the light. The scrape grows louder, joined by a hiss that slithers through the air, alien against the marsh's hush. He shouts for Mara, his voice faltering, and the hiss turns into whisper-soft, overlapping voices rising from the hole. He steps back, clutching the scarf, his boots sinking into the mud. The whispers swell, blending with the rustle, a chorus pressing against his ears. He leans over the hole, the light catching on a ledge below, littered with debris bones, cloth, trinkets all coated in that oily sheen. Levi's breath fogs as he spots Mara's ring, its band warped, nestled among the remains. The whispers sharpen, and a hand lunges from the dark, pale and clawing, scraping the ledge before retreating. He stumbles back, the flashlight slipping, its beam spinning across the mound, the rustle shaking the earth around him. Footsteps splash behind him, heavy and uneven, stirring the water with each deliberate stride. Levi turns, the light trembling, glimpsing a figure tall, its limbs too long, its head tilted wrong before it melts into the gloom. The footsteps circle, closing in, and he bolts toward the hole, clutching the ring, the whispers rising into a scream that pierces the night. Shapes loom along the mound's edge, their silhouettes swaying, too many to count, their presence a weight on the air. The hole swallows him as he slides down its slope, the walls tight, the air thick with damp and decay. His light flickers, illuminating gashes scratched into the stone frantic, overlapping, stretching deeper as he descends. The scream echoes, joined by a dragging scrape that sends chills up his spine. He lands in a chamber, its ceiling dripping, its floor slick with puddles that shimmer under the beam. Mara's coat lies in the center, soaked in sheen, surrounded by bones still wet with marrow. A figure crouches in the shadows, its form cloaked in tatters, its head bowed over a pile of debris. Levi's light shakes as he approaches, recognizing Mara's boots, but the figure turns, revealing a face that isn't her spale, eyeless, its mouth gaping in a silent grin. It lunges, and he swings the flashlight, cracking it against its skull, the bulb shattering, plunging the chamber into darkness. The scream surges, shapes shifting in the black, their claws scraping stone as they close in. He runs, hands groping for the hole. The creatures pursue, their scrapes and drags filling the air, their bodies pressing through the narrow passage. Levi claws upward, the stone cutting his palms, the coat slipping as he reaches the surface. He bursts into the mound, the marsh alive with movement figures swaying, their heads cocked, the scream a deafening roar. The ground quakes, the hole widening, swallowing the edges as he flees, the gloom blurring around him. He trips, tumbling into a pool, the ring glinting beside him in the mud. Levi crawls free, the marsh endless under the shadowed sky, the rustle fading, the figures gone. His flashlight lies broken, the ring clutched tight, its metal warm against his skin. A wanderer named Elise finds him on a muddy bank, soaked and muttering, the sheen still clinging to his hands. He tells his story at her camp, words spilling out about Mara and the whispers, met with a furrowed brow as she offers coffee he doesn't drink. Elise glances outside, the mound's faint outline in the distance, and stays silent, her hands steady but pale. The next day, Levi leads Elise and a tracker Amos to the mound, but the hole has vanished, the ground smooth, the bones and coat nowhere in sight. Amos sighs, suggesting exhaustion or a trick of the dusk, but his eyes linger on the ring, its sheen faintly pulsing in the light. Levi returns home, the apartment cold, Mara's scarf inexplicably on the counter, dry but heavy. Sleep evades him, the whispers echoing in his ears, the sheen's chill lingering on his skin. Then he finds a note in Elise's handwriting. I heard them too slipped under his door. The lights dim one night, and the rustle surges, rattling the walls. Levi grabs a knife, the ring glowing faintly, its sheen thrumming as shadows stretch across the room. The scream seeps through the floor, joined by thuds against the windows, the ceiling, the door. He barricades himself in, the knife raised, but the shadows thicken, hands pressing through the walls, pale and dripping. The windows crack, mist swirling inward, and the lights die, the whispers drowning his cries. Morning breaks, the apartment empty, the knife on the floor, the ring and note gone. The door stands locked, the windows intact despite the cracks. Levi vanished. A neighbor, old Mr. Finch, hears screams in the night, sees shapes slink toward the marsh, but the trackers find no tracks, only Elise, standing at the mound, staring into the shadows with a haunted gaze. She mutters about Amos, her lost partner, hinting the eyeless figure was him, twisted by the random whispers that claimed them all. The marsh stretches on, its shadows long and still, whispering tales of lost souls and disjointed horrors. Levi's name joins Mara's in the stories, carried on the wind, a warning etched into the dusk's shroud. Elise lingers at the mound, her own voice joining the whispers, drawn by the randomness she once escaped, her fate sealed as the sheen ripples anew. The twilight drapes the hills in shadow as Nora trudges through the brittle grass, her flashlight wavering in her grip. Its beam slices through the dusk, searching for her brother, Theo, who vanished after a frantic call about a grinning lantern in the wilds. His voice trembled with panic, the line cutting off mid-breath, leaving only silence behind. The air hangs crisp with dust and a faint, sour rot, urging her deeper into the expanse. She clutches Theo's compass, found spinning wildly near a rock, its needle warm against her palm, drawing her onward. A flicker pulses through the earth, soft and unsteady, trembling the soil beneath Nora's boots. She stops, sweeping the light across the hills, its glow catching on twisted shrubs and a hollow where the ground dips unnaturally. The flicker beats, rhythmic and eerie, pulling her toward the depression where shadows cling thick and dark. She calls Theo's name, her voice thin against the vastness, answered only by a faint, wet rustle from the hollow's depths. Her heart pounds, but she presses forward, the compass glinting in her grasp. The hollow cradles a lantern, its frame rusted, its glass streaked with a dark, oily sheen that shimmers in the flashlight's beam. Nora's light shakes as she approaches, spotting Theo's scarf, tangled in the grass, its fabric soaked with that same sheen. The flicker deepens, thrumming through her legs, and she peers closer, the beam revealing a faint grin etched into the lantern's glass, glowing dimly. A scrape rises from the hollow, slow and deliberate, and her stomach twists, dread rooting her in place. A shape darts beyond the hollow, swift and hunched, vanishing as Nora swings the light. The rustle grows louder, joined by a hiss that slithers through the air, alien against the hill's silence. She shouts for Theo, her voice faltering, and the hiss turns into laughter soft, overlapping chuckles rising from the lantern. She steps back, clutching the scarf, her boots kicking up dust. The laughter swells, blending with the flicker, a chorus pressing against her ears. She examines the lantern, the light catching on its base, littered with debris bones, cloth, trinkets all coated in that oily sheen. Nora's breath fogs as she spots Theo's ring, its band bent, pressed against the glass as if trapped inside. The laughter sharpens, and a hand lunges from the lantern's glow, pale and clawing, scraping the air before retreating. She stumbles back, the flashlight slipping, its beam spinning across the hollow, the flicker shaking the ground around her. Footsteps crunch behind her, heavy and uneven, stirring the dust with each deliberate stride. Nora turns, the light trembling, glimpsing a figure tall, its limbs too long, its head tilted wrong before it melts into the dusk. The footsteps circle, closing in, and she bolts toward a crevice near the lantern, clutching the ring, the laughter rising into a scream that pierces the night. Shapes loom along the hollow's edge, their silhouettes swaying, too many to count, their presence a weight on the air. The crevice swallows her as she slides down its slope, the walls tight, the air thick with damp and decay. Her light flickers, illuminating gashes scratched into the stone frantic, overlapping, stretching deeper as she descends. The scream echoes, joined by a dragging scrape that sends chills up her spine. She lands in a chamber, its ceiling low, its floor slick with puddles that shimmer under the beam. Theo's coat lies in the center, soaked in sheen, surrounded by bones still wet with marrow. A figure crouches in the shadows, its form cloaked in tatters, its head bowed over a pile of debris. Nora's light shakes as she approaches, recognizing Theo's boots, but the figure turns, revealing a face that isn't his spale, eyeless, its mouth stretched in a wide, grinning leer. It lunges, and she swings the flashlight, cracking it against its skull, the bulb shattering, plunging the chamber into darkness. The scream surges, shapes shifting in the black, their claws scraping stone as they close in. She runs, hands groping for the crevice. The creatures pursue, their scrapes and laughter filling the air, their bodies pressing through the narrow passage. Nora claws upward, the stone cutting her palms, the coat slipping as she reaches the surface. She bursts into the hollow, the hills alive with movement figures swaying, their heads cocked, the scream a deafening roar. The ground quakes, the crevice widening, swallowing the lantern as she flees, the dusk blurring around her. She trips, tumbling into a ditch, the ring glinting beside her in the dirt. Mara crawls free, the plains endless under the shadowed sky, the clatter fading, the figures gone. Her flashlight lies broken, the watch clutched tight, its metal warm against her skin. A wanderer named Theo finds her on a dusty trail, soaked and muttering, the sheen still clinging to her hands. She tells her story at his camp, words spilling out about Elias and the bones, met with a furrowed brow as he offers tea she doesn't drink. Theo glances outside, the hollow's faint outline in the distance, and stays silent, his hands steady but pale. The next day, Mara leads Theo and a tracker Ruth to the hollow, but the tunnel has vanished, the ground smooth, the bones and coat nowhere in sight. Ruth sighs, suggesting exhaustion or a trick of the dusk, but her eyes linger on the watch, its sheen faintly pulsing in the light. Mara returns home, the apartment cold, Elias's scarf inexplicably on the counter, dry but heavy. Sleep evades her, the clatter echoing in her ears, the sheen's chill lingering on her skin. Then she finds a note in Theo's handwriting. I collected them too, slipped under her door. The lights dim one night, and the clatter surges, rattling the walls. Mara grabs a knife, the watch glowing faintly, its sheen thrumming as shadows stretch across the room. The scream seeps through the floor, joined by thuds against the windows, the ceiling, the door. She barricades herself in, the knife raised but the shadows thicken. hands pressing through the walls, pale and dripping. The windows crack, dust swirling inward, and the lights die, the clatter drowning her cries. Morning breaks, the apartment empty, the knife on the floor, the watch and note gone. The door stands locked, the windows intact despite the cracks. Mara vanished. A neighbor, old Mr. Vance, hears screams in the night, sees shapes slink toward the plains. But the trackers find no tracks, only Theo, standing at the hollow, staring into the dark with a haunted gaze. He mutters about Ruth, his lost sister, hinting the eyeless figure was her, collected by the lair he once fed. The plains stretch on, their shadows long and still, whispering tales of lost souls and bony horrors. Mara's name joins Elias's in the stories, carried on the wind, a warning etched into the dusk's shroud. Theo lingers at the hollow, his own hands stacking bones in the silence. Drawn by the clatter he once served, his fate sealed as the sheen piles anew. In the heart of a dense, ancient forest, there was a small village named Elder Grove. The villagers lived in quaint cottages, their lives seemingly untouched by the modern world. The forest that surrounded them was a place of mystery and legend, filled with towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets to one another. The villagers spoke of strange occurrences in the woods, but few dared to venture far from the safety of their homes. One evening, a young woman named Alara arrived in Eldergrove. She had inherited a small cottage from her grandmother, who had lived in the village for many years. Alara was intrigued by the stories of the forest and decided to explore it despite the warnings of the villagers. As she walked deeper into the woods, she felt a strange sensation, as if the trees were watching her every move. Alara soon discovered an old, weathered path that led to a hidden clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, ancient tree with gnarled branches that twisted like fingers. She felt an inexplicable pull towards the tree, and as she approached, she heard faint whispers in the wind. The whispers grew louder, and she realized they were calling her name. Confused and frightened, Alara tried to leave, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, each one more urgent than the last. She saw shadows moving among the trees, and a cold, clammy hand touched her shoulder. She turned around, but there was no one there. Alara's heart raced as she struggled to break free from the strange force holding her. The whispers became a roar, and she felt herself being drawn towards the ancient tree. Just as she thought she would be consumed by the darkness, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was an old woman, her eyes filled with sorrow and a hint of madness. "Who are you?" Alara managed to gasp. "I am the guardian of this place," the old woman replied, her voice trembling. "I have been here for centuries, protecting the village from the darkness that lies within the forest. But now, it is too strong, and I can no longer hold it back." Alara's mind raced as she tried to understand the old woman's words. She realized that the whispers were the voices of the souls trapped in the forest, unable to find peace. The old woman explained that the ancient tree was the source of the darkness, and it needed to be destroyed to free the trapped souls. With the old woman's guidance, Alara gathered the villagers and returned to the clearing. They worked together to weaken the tree's roots, and as they did, the whispers grew louder and more desperate. Finally, with a tremendous effort, they managed to uproot the ancient tree. As the tree fell, a blinding light erupted from the ground, and the whispers ceased. The trapped souls were released, and the forest was filled with a sense of peace. The old woman, her purpose fulfilled, faded away into the light. Alara and the villagers returned to Eldergrove, forever changed by their experience. The forest was no longer a place of fear, but a reminder of the power of unity and the strength of the human spirit. And though the whispers had ceased, Alara knew that the forest would always hold a part of her heart.